that Meidas Touch has the #1 podcast around, and they're beating Joe Rogan. And I hope that continues, and I see no reason why it won't. And one of my favorite follows on social media, of course, is Ron Filipkowski, who is nice enough to join us as he does pretty much on a weekly basis. Ron, it's a pleasure to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Doing great. I'm following what's going on in the Senate right now behind closed doors with the Democrats on the CR, if you want to get to that in a few after you talk about Ireland.
Yes, I do want to get to that, Ron. God, there's so much to talk about. Can I start here? Donald Trump, it appears, was able to offend people of the Jewish faith and Palestinians in the same sentence. He said this before, Chuck Schumer's not Jewish, he's now Palestinian, almost using that as a slur. What do you make of that? And then we'll get to some of the other idiotic things he said.
Yeah, he's used that line many times before. What he's talking about is that he's sympathetic to people in Gaza, right? So he's not a true Jew. He's like disloyal to Israel because he also is sympathetic to what the people in Gaza are going through, not Hamas, the people, right? And there's a distinction there. So yeah, I mean, that's one of his favorite slurs, which of course, again, if any other politician in America said something like that, that would basically be like the end of their career. But Trump does this stuff so often, that people are like desensitized to it, including media.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about
the conversation about the tariffs. That was as soon as he said that, and keep in mind, he said that right in front of the Irish Prime Minister. Where a reporter asked him. He's talking about the trade deficit with Ireland, and we've always had, a pretty good trade deficit with Ireland because, like, the average income in Ireland is not very high, and it definitely wasn't high 10 years ago, and it was even worse 20 years ago. And they simply just don't have a lot of money to buy American products, import American products. It's just the way it always is. But there is a lot of cheap labor in Ireland and hardworking people in Ireland. And so our companies will have set up factories in Ireland. So that accounts for some of the trade deficit. But it's gotten better. I mean, over the decades, over the years. And in fact, last year, it got significantly better. So for Trump to kind of go out of his way to take a shot at Ireland and say, he actually said, they're ripping us off in front of the Irish PM. Well, as soon as he said it, I know Irish media. I follow European media every day. And I knew, I said right away, I posted on Twitter, I said, that's going to be the headline in all the Irish newspapers tomorrow is they're ripping us off. None of the other stuff he said is going to matter. It's going to be that line is going to be played up in Ireland. And so we add another country to our enemies list, along with, Greenland, Denmark, Canada, Mexico, Panama. I'm losing track. Ukraine.
Yeah, I am as well. But Ron, speaking of tariffs, what did you make of Caroline Levitt yesterday getting into it with I believe it was it an AP reporter? I'm trying to remember. I think, and she clearly said something that was idiotic and stupid and doesn't understand how tariffs work or is lying about it, either or. And then she attacks the reporter. What did you make of her response there?
Here's the problem is that Caroline Levitt just doesn't know anything about anything, and that's a real serious problem. And she doesn't appear to be interested in doing the work to learn. You see, because I'm going to give Kayleigh McEnany some credit here on something. All right. So, I mean, even though I don't particularly like Kayleigh McEnany, but when she went in as press secretary, press secretary is the job. It's sort of like a quarterback on a football team, where a quarterback on a football team is the only one who has to know everyone else's job. Right? They have to know what the wide receiver is supposed to do, the line, the coach, everything. Everybody else on the field just has to know their job. A quarterback has to know everyone else's job as well as his own. So a press secretary is exactly like that in a White House, where they have to know what DOJ is doing, Commerce is doing, DHS is doing. They have to know what is happening across the government, because they're going to get asked questions by media about a wide range of things, and they have no idea what those questions are going to be. And so what did Kayleigh knew she didn't know any of that stuff. So she studied her ass off.
And she brought that big book with her.
She would bring in the big binder, and she had notes, and she talked about how many hours she would spend working that binder and preparing it so that she would have answers. And KJP did it. And who was before KJP? Jen Psaki had the same kind of big ass binder. They all do, because there's no way that you can know all of that off the top of your head, right? But Levitt, who's 27 years old and who got her job because she, I guess, looked and sounded good to Trump on Fox when she ran for Congress in New Hampshire and got annihilated in her election. Then she married a 60-year-old rich guy, which even probably made her appeal to Trump even more. And so she just doesn't know anything. And she walks in with no notes. So when she gets asked the most basic questions about economics, she doesn't know the answer. She's just up there bullshitting. And when she runs out of Trump talking points, then she's out of material and she doesn't know what to do. So she just throws the insult game out. Like she cut that, that guy's trying to have a serious conversation about tariffs. And as soon as she said, oh, who you with, AP? Oh, well, that figures, and moves on. That's the same move that Trump does. If he gets a question he doesn't like or doesn't know the answer to, he'll ask, what our outfit are you with? They'll say NBC.
Ron, he just did that. Ron, he just did that on his plane on Air Force One. Yeah,
that's a move. And he'll just say, oh, they suck. Next question.
Yep.
That's his move and her move to get out of a question that they don't know the answer to.
Good segue, Ron, to my next question, because on Air Force One the other day, he was asked, is Putin making you look bad? Because Putin, obviously, with the airstrikes a few days ago, and Donald Trump's response is, oh, well, who are you with? And you and I have been talking about this a lot, the fact that all the fake promises, but one of them, which was the war is going to be over in 24 hours. In fact, he said the war would be over before he even got into office. And he was asked about that again today, and he gave a stupid answer. What do you make of that? I mean, I think right now what's happening in Ukraine, you can make the argument worse now than it was 7 weeks ago before he even got into office. Another false, promise that wasn't fulfilled.
Yeah, we're further away from a peace deal now than when he took office, because, he's already given away every bargaining chip we had. He's threatening them with more sanctions. I watched Russia's primetime news that day when he announced that, this was 3 days ago. We're going to hit Russia with more sanctions if they don't agree to this ceasefire.
Right.
And they were laughing at Trump on Russian media. Prime time. They were laughing at him. They're like, sanctions? We don't sell anything to the U.S. You've sanctioned us on everything. The Biden administration, there's nothing left to sanction. So, I mean, the Russians know, they're smart enough to know, this guy's full of shit. Unfortunately, half of our country isn't smart enough to figure it out, but the Russians know he's full of crap. So, what do? They said, repeatedly, over and over and over during the campaign said, I will have this over the first day I take office. I know exactly what I need to say to Putin. I'm going to get him in a room. I'm going to have a conversation, and this is going to be over. That's what he said 100 times during the campaign. That never happened. Okay. It's still going on. So what do we have now? We have Rubio and NSA Walz going over in Saudi Arabia, meeting with the Ukraine delegation. Ukraine says, well, of course we agree to a ceasefire. We would have agreed to a ceasefire the first day. We would agree to a ceasefire any day. Yes, of course. So then Rubio comes out like Neville Chamberlain in 1938 and peace in our time, waving a piece of paper that Hitler signed promising, not to invade Poland, and it's like, oh, peace in our time, peace in our time. They come out and Rubio, you could see it on his face. You can hear it in his voice. He knows that this is going nowhere. So he comes out and he's like, well, we've gotten Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire. Now we just have to get Putin to agree to it. Yeah. And that's kind of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a huge problem. Speaking of problems, we've never had a president like this in so many different ways, but using the office in the White House to sell cars and hawk cars. What do you make of the fact Donald Trump is out there yesterday while veterans are losing their jobs across the country and inflation's up, gas prices are up, and the country's on fire, for lack of a better term? You have Donald Trump looking like the buffoon that he is with Elon Musk, trying to sell Teslas and help the stock that has plunged over the last couple of days. What do you make of that yesterday and that car infomercial, right? Because that's really what it was.
Well, obviously it's disgusting that he's using the White House to sell products for his businesses and Musk's businesses. Look, he posts stuff about his crypto during the workday. Like he's in the Oval Office. We know he's in there, and it's like Tuesday at 10:30, and he's posting crypto ads on True Social. You know, I mean, like, so he's obviously turned the White House into the home shopping network. But you know, the thing about this is that Musk, of course, lies about everything. And the reality is that Musk's stock is tanking for two reasons. Number one, he's never there. The stockholders, major stockholders, are all complaining. Even Dave Portnoy, the Barstool Sports guy who loves Musk, posted yesterday, like, when the hell is I'm losing my ass on these Tesla shares. When is Musk going to get back to work? So for one thing, you know, he's never around. And I don't know, that might be better for the company. I don't know. But the bottom line is he's not anywhere around. His interest right now is like 90% Doge, 10% SpaceX, 0% Tesla. And that's been that way for about a year now. So that's number one. But number two is he's so toxic all around the world after what he said about the Polish prime minister. He's called him a small man. You can't sell a Tesla in Poland now. After he backed the AfD Nazi party in Germany, he can't sell Teslas in Germany. France, he can't sell them. His sales across Europe are down 50%. His sales in China are down almost 50%. And his sales in the United States are down. And so the excuse that they're using now for this is they're claiming that, you know, it's Democrats backed by George Soros who are like attacking dealerships because there's a handful of protests, or maybe, you know, 2 or 3 Teslas that have been graffitied or something. And they're saying that, you know, there's this reign of terror by Democrats, and that's the reason why the stock is down. That is not the reason why the stock is down. The stock is down because people all over the world hate Elon Musk and don't want to buy his cars anymore.
That's very true. I agree with you. If you're just joining us, Ron Filipkowski from Meidas Touch joining us. Ron, I want to get your thoughts on Gavin Newsom. Starting with Charlie Kirk, and I know he's got Steve Bannon on his podcast. My opinion, Ron, is as follows. And I had Enrique Tarrio on my show yesterday for 45 minutes, and a lot of people were angry at me. Why would you give that guy a platform? I'm not angry at Gavin Newsom for having these guys on his show. What I'm angry at Gavin Newsom for is not putting enough pushback on the Charlie Kirk interview, for example. I don't think he pushed back enough. What are your thoughts on this, getting these figures on his podcast? Why do you think he's doing it? I think I know why he's doing it. He's trying to become a centrist and appeal to some others. But do you think that's a fair criticism? And what are your thoughts on these interviews?
This is becoming a very serious controversy because this wasn't a one-off. If it was a one-off with Kirk, I think that wouldn't have been that big a deal. But this appears to be like his agenda. Is because he's had Bannon on. He had Michael Savage on, who's a piece of garbage.
Awful person.
Right winger. So, so 3 of his guests, 3 of his first 5 guests are far right loons. And I get, like, first of all, you bring people on to fight with them. So that's different. That's not what Newsom's doing.
Right.
That's not what Newsom's doing. Newsom is kissing their ass. He's laughing it up with them. He's smiling. He's taking photos with them. He's talking about what they have in common. I heard some clips from the Steve Bannon show, which I think is being released like later today, but I heard some of the preview stuff, and it's sickening. Like, so, and Adam Kinzinger has been out there rampaging. He did a TikTok, he did a Substack, he's done social media posts. He's furious because what Kinzinger makes the point is like, look, there's been a lot of us that have been Gavin's been in California, doing his thing in California. There's been a lot of us that have been in the trenches fighting and battling Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, Michael Savage, these guys specifically. I've had run-ins with all 3 of those guys personally myself. They've come after me. I go after them. And we're fighting their lies and their disinformation and their racism, and we're calling them out, and we're showing how they systematically lie. So to see, like, the guy who's our presumptive front runner for president laughing and joking with these guys and, you know, having a good old time on his podcast, no, we don't get it. And we take it very seriously, and we take it very personally. And I'll tell you, I was all in on Newsom like a month ago. If Mark Kelly runs, that's my guy now. I want Mark Kelly to run. I think Mark Kelly is a better, more authentic, real person than Gavin Newsom.
And Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been on this show before where you've said, if Gavin runs, you were all in, and you said you'd even work. You would work in his administration, and you would do everything you could. So now you're saying that's you're done.
After the Kirk thing, I was like, first of all, when he announced Kirk, I said, I want to see if he's going to call him out, because his promo for his podcast says, I'm going to bring on right wingers and call out their lies. Okay, good. Let's see it. I didn't see any calling out with Kirk. Then I just watched some clips from Bannon. Again, I see him being not only being very chummy, but criticizing Democrats with them, going along with their criticisms of Democrats. Yeah. Now, I criticize Democrats too, but I'm not going to criticize Democrats to Steve Bannon or to Charlie Kirk. I'm going to do it with other Democrats. Right. I'm not going to do it with those guys because those guys are looking to destroy us.
Ron, I'm with you on that 100%. I echoed what you said on this show for the last several days. Now, I want to ask you another question, though. Speaking of Democrats, the 10 Democrats that decided to censure Green, Jared Moskowitz being one of them. He's somebody that I've been in his corner. I like Jared Moskowitz. I'm not supporting him anymore. And if the argument is, well, if we don't like what they're doing on the right, we also have to call out our own on the left. I think they're cowards and they have no backbone, what they did with Green. I'm curious to get your thoughts on like a Jared Moskowitz and the other 9 Democrats that voted to censure Mr. Green.
Interesting. There's a lot of people off Moskowitz because of that. You're right. You're definitely not alone. I have a different feeling about that only for one reason, because of Al Green himself. Because I think Al Green loved being censored. And so, I think that Al was like, back when I was in the Marines, we used to go out to bars a lot, and you'd have a bunch of guys go together in a group, and you always had those couple guys in your group who you knew, like, they're only going out tonight to get in a fight. They're looking to fight someone. And you kind of like, let's not, I remember saying this, like, not tonight, guys. Come on, just chill out. Let's just have fun. Don't get in a fight tonight, but they always were. As soon as they walk in a club, they're looking for somebody to fight. To me, that was Al Green. That was Al Green at that speech. He walked in there and he's like, I'm getting thrown out. Like, I'm getting tossed, and I'm going to make a show of getting tossed. And so he wanted that to happen. And,
I agree.
And then when the censor thing came out, he posted on social media that morning, hey, I'm being censored at 10 a.m. Everybody check it out. So I mean, he was owning it.
I agree, Ron, but can we both be right? Like, I agree with you. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. That was,
I gotcha.
But okay, so Ron, it's interesting. I said this on the Piers Morgan show last week. I said Democrats would have been better off either not showing up or all leaving at the same time.
Yeah, that was the move.
I thought they looked a little ridiculous, sitting in their chair, slumped over with those weird bingo signs or whatever the hell you would call those. I thought they looked a little ridiculous. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and this dovetails into what's happening with the Senate today.
Yeah,
which is leadership issues. They were all had a meeting about how they were going to handle Trump's speech. They had a caucus, and they were divided, just as Senate Democrats are divided over the CR. The House was divided over how to handle Trump's speech. And everybody wanted to go their own way. They couldn't get a consensus on how to do this. And those were the options. The option was, we're all going to boycott.
Right.
We're going to go and we're going to cause a scene. We're going to have signs and noisemakers. We're going to get thrown out, or, we're just going to sit there silently, or we're going to wait until Trump comes in, gets to the podium, and then when all the TV cameras are on him, then we're going to get up and silently walk out. And I thought that was the move right there.
Yep.
Was all show up, wait until Trump, and that would have been so dramatic. But instead you had a handful of people who decided to boycott, a handful of people who decided to make a scene, a handful of people who decided to bring signs. So you had all these different mixed messages being thrown out there, and it just looked like we were in disarray.
Ron, to me, it's a microcosm of where the Democrat Party is today. They're disorganized. They're not all on the same page. You have some of them that show courage and fortitude. You have others that are cowards, that are spineless. I think what took place there is a simple explanation. Partly in why they lost this election in 2024. They're not on the same page. The messaging is inconsistent, and they proved that last week.
Yep. And unfortunately, we're about to see it again today with the Senate, because what's happening is Chuck Schumer got outmaneuvered by Mike Johnson, and that's hard to do because Mike Johnson is a shit strategist. He's a dope. He's not very bright. He's got some people around him who are a little bit better than him, but Schumer is about as bad as it gets when it comes to strategy. And so what did Johnson do? So he says we're going to pass a clean CR. Clean CR means like just continuing the budget that is in existence. But then he added two little poison pills to the CR. And they are, number one is authorizing Trump to do tariffs unilaterally without seeking congressional approval. That was added to the CR that the House just passed yesterday.
Unbelievable.
Number two is to allow Elon Musk to unilaterally make Doge cuts to the existing budget. So those are two things that are in there that House Democrats justifiably objected to. They did not like those two things, and they said that's why we're not voting against it. But you see how Johnson outmaneuvered them is he waited and waited until yesterday morning, and then he announced, right after we do this vote, I'm adjourning and sending everyone home. And so you have the vote early in the week, and then the government shuts down Friday. Then you send everyone home. What that means is that if Senate Democrats filibuster, which they can do, okay, they need 7 Democrats to vote for this CR. They need 7. So if all Democrats are united, or if they only get 4 or 5, basically that forces Johnson to scramble and bring the House back, which he's not going to do, or the government's going to shut down and we have a big chaos next week, right? So they're all huddled today, not knowing what to do. But Johnson put him in this box because now it's going to look like they caused the shutdown, not Republicans, by adding these. See, if Schumer was out there the last week saying there are these 2 poison pills in the CR, this is why we can't support it. We don't want the government to shut down, but Johnson needs to take these 2 things out of the bill or we're going to filibuster. Then I think they could have gotten some public support in case we had a showdown. Yeah. But Schumer didn't do that. Schumer was silent. No one from the Senate did that. People in the House were doing that, but the Senate said nothing. Schumer was booked to interview with us, and he knew that was one of the questions that we were going to ask him, and he canceled the interview. He canceled the interview. So this is where we're at. So what's going to happen here now? And by the way, no one has prepped the base for this betrayal. And that's the other problem you're going to have. See, if you know you're going to do something to infuriate your base, you get to the influencers, you get to the podcasters, and you help them explain to the base why you did what you did, the strategy behind it. But they didn't do that because they're arrogant and they're old and they don't recognize new media. And so what they're going to do is they're just going to roll out tomorrow and they're just going to vote for this thing. And 7 or 8 Democrats are going to be hung out to dry because the whole base is going to be screaming and yelling at them. Why did you go along with this? And, they're going to be trying to explain it then, but it's too late.
And Chuck Schumer canceling a podcast interview with the most popular podcast on the planet. That's partially why Kamala Harris lost. That's partially why Donald Trump is in office. And it's absurd, ridiculous. And as I've said before, and I say again, Schumer needs to go. The Democrats need new leadership, younger leadership, and the types of people that will not cancel on Meidas Touch doing a podcast. That is embarrassing. Ron, I would assume that is the article that you're working on right now. Is that a fair assumption?
No, man. The guys don't want to burn bridges, there. So we're going to pick our battles on that. I mean, we're disappointed.
Yeah.
But, look, these Democrats are here. Let me tell you who's going to vote for it. It's going to be seven or 8 senators who are in swing states, in Arizona's, Nevada's, New Hampshire,
sure.
Georgia. Ossoff will probably vote for it, who are up for re-election. Those are the ones who are going to vote for it. And then all the other Democrats in the safe states are all going to vote against it. And it's just like the typical Schumer games. That's the game that he plays, you know? And so it's disheartening, you know, the lot of the old guard just need to go. And I'm not being ageist here, but they need to go. And, you know, I pointed out, you know, Shaheen from New Hampshire announced that she wasn't running, and she's not one of the problems. She's good, but, you know, she's 79 next year.
Right.
So what are you going to run for another 6-year term? I give her credit for like, no, I'm not going to be here till I'm 85. And there's a congressman there, Pappas, who's 47 years old, who's fantastic, who wants to run for that seat. That's what needs to happen in places around the country, including New York, where Dan Goldman wants to run for Chuck Schumer's seat and needs him to retire.
Yeah, Goldman would be fantastic, by the way. Really smart, bright man, and he's not 105 years old, and he's not married to Caroline Levitt. So, Ron, always a pleasure, my friend. The hardest working man in the business, and one of my favorite follows. You guys are great at Meidas Touch, and there's a reason why you're beating Joe Rogan. Always appreciate the time, my friend. We'll let you get back to work. We'll catch up with you next week, and always a pleasure, Ron. Thank you.
All right, man. See you later.
Appreciate it. That's Ron Filipkowski, everybody. I mean that. He's one of the best in the business, and I say that every single time he joins me. So smart, so good at what he does, and I highly recommend you read his articles and you subscribe. The man is just fantastic.